Welcome back. In this second video, I want to talk about the hedonistic calculus and give an example of how the hedonistic calculus might work. So it's important to understand at the beginning of this discussion about utilitarianism why we're going to use something like the hedonistic calculus, why we're going to use kind of the mathematics of ethics to try to figure out what the overall utility is in a situation. So look on page 128 in CPQ at what Bentham says about the individual and the relationship of the individual to the community. This is about two-thirds of the way down the page on 128. Bentham says, "The interest of the community is one of the most general expressions that can occur in the phraseology of morals. No wonder that the meaning is often lost. When it has meaning, it is this: the community is a fictitious body composed of the individual persons who are considered as constituting, as it were, its members. The interests of the community, then, is what? The sum of the interests of the several members who compose it." So the reason that Bentham says what he has said here is he's trying to make the point that when we talk about what's in the interests of the community, of the body of individuals as a whole, all we're saying, according to Bentham, is we're interested in the good for all the individuals taken one by one, added together. That's what we mean by the good of the community, or the benefit of the community. We mean the benefit of those individuals taken as a sum. And so what he's going to do with the hedonistic calculus is he's going to try to identify, remember the principle of utility told us to do that thing that has the most utility, that's the right action. The hedonistic calculus is aimed at helping us identify which action that is. So you have a range of options in front of you, and you have to make a choice. What are you going to do? The hedonistic calculus says, here are 7 characteristics of each of those options. Say you have 3 options. You take one option and you look at the overall amount of pleasure and pain associated with that option, taken as a whole for all the individuals involved, and that gives you the utility value for that option. You do the same thing for the second option, the same thing for the third option, and then the one that has the highest utility value, after you've churned the hedonistic calculus, that gives you the action that you ought to take, the option that is best, that is morally good, according to utilitarianism. So here's how the hedonistic calculus works. It has to figure out how much pain or pleasure there is, and not all pains and pleasures are equal. So look on 130. Actually, the best spot is on 131. There's a list of 7 items that any given pain or pleasure can have certain characteristics. So the first item is the intensity of the pain or the pleasure. And obviously, a pleasure that is less intense is weighted less in this calculus than a pleasure that's more intense. And conversely, a pain that's more intense is something you're more eager to get rid of than a pain that's less intense. Second one is the duration of the pain or pleasure. The third, the certainty or the probability. How likely is this pain or pleasure going to occur? The propinquity, which is the fourth one, is its remoteness or nearness in time, proximity in time. So we tend to be more motivated to avoid pains that are going to happen tomorrow instead of ones that are going to happen 30 years from now. Even if they have the same likelihood of occurring, there's something, maybe it's psychological, that causes us to want to avoid pains that are closer to us in time, and pleasures that are closer to us in time seem better or more desirable or somehow weighted more heavily than pleasures that are further out in time. Fecundity relates to the fruitfulness of that pain or pleasure. So if you have, say, something like training in a musical instrument, and you take pleasure in playing that instrument, it might be the kind of pleasure that, as you continue engaging in it, leads to an increase in skill, in performance, increase in the breadth of your repertoire, and that's going to lead to more pleasures of the same kind. So it's kind of fruitful in promoting further pleasures. Bentham talks about this a bit on 130, and then purity has to do with whether or not pleasures lead to more pleasures or pains lead to more pains. So you might have a pleasure like the musical example that leads to more pleasures. You might have a pleasure like eating lots of candy that ends up leading to pain because it causes tooth decay or whatever. So the purity of the pain or the pleasure is going to be one factor as well. And then the extent, the seventh characteristic, just relates to the number of individuals who are affected by or have some share in that pain or that pleasure. So those are the 7 characteristics that Bentham is interested in looking at for every option that you have in front of you. And then you run down the hedonistic calculus with these characteristics in mind. So let's look at an example of how the hedonistic calculus might work. This is going to be a hyper-simplified example, but we'll see how it goes. So look on 131. You see steps 1 through 6, starting halfway down the page, going down to the bottom of the page, and that is the actual method of the hedonistic calculus. So in this example, the scenario is that there's a bunch of kids playing soccer. So there's a bunch of kids who are just having fun, but then one kid is on the outside wanting to join in, and one of the kids who's already playing soccer is a bit of a bully. So the scenario that we're going to look at asks, should this kid be allowed to play soccer or not allowed to play soccer? The bully decides that he's going to punch this kid in the gut, not allow him to play soccer. The kid who got punched, we'll call him Sam. We'll just name the bully. And then we have also other kids who are standing around, who are bystanders. So in judging whether or not this was a good action or the right action for the bully to take, we have a few things to consider. One is, what are his other options? So he could have bit his tongue and said, okay, fine, the kid can play, but I don't have to be happy about it. He could have welcomed the kid in to play. What he chose to do is the only one that we're going to kind of run down and analyze, just because it takes a bit of time. And you notice that for utilitarianism, the full range of options need to be assessed. And so in order to figure out what you want to do, you have to examine all the options in front of you, identify the utility value associated with each one, and choose the one with the greatest overall utility. So in this scenario, we're going to have positive and negative utility indicated by the plus and the minus. These are going to be fictional units. We call them something like hedons, or units of pleasure and pain. So the pleasure is going to be the plus, the pain is going to be the minus. And we're going to figure out in kind of a rough way how much of it is there in this scenario for each character involved. So for Sam, he wants to play soccer. He's obviously interested in playing. The bully comes over, punches him in the gut. So probably not any pleasure at all involved. So I'm just going to put nothing in there, and obviously quite a lot of pain. So we'll use some scale, something like 0 to 9 or 10. And I mean, there's kind of just a rough estimate. It's sort of like when you go to the doctor and they have those charts on the wall that say how much pain are you in, like that kind of estimate. So Sam could be in a lot worse pain. The bully didn't break any bones. He embarrassed Sam and he physically harmed him, but it could be a lot worse. So let's just say 5. And you might come up with a different assessment in this situation, but we'll go with 5. So the bully here, I think, probably has less pleasure than Sam has pain. The bully isn't physically feeling any good pleasure. He's enjoying this moment probably, otherwise he wouldn't be a bully. So let's give him maybe 2 or 3 positive hedons, and he's probably not experiencing any negative hedons. So we have also, let's just say 3 other kids. There are probably quite a few more, but and if we had more time, we should run through all of them. But let's just say, in general, one of the kids is a friend of the bullies, and he kind of takes some pleasure in what's going on, so we'll give him a 1 here. There's another kid who maybe is friends with Sam, or at least has had negative experiences with a bully before, doesn't enjoy this at all. And then the other kid maybe just finds it unpleasant, but isn't terribly troubled by what's going on. So overall, what we then do is add up the 2 columns. So on our positive hedons side, we have 3, 1, so we have 4 here, and 5, 7, 8 here. And then the overall utility just is the 4 minus the 8. So we have a utility value of -4. Now, there's something that happens here pretty often where people get tripped up and they think, well, negative utility value, that means it's a bad action. And that's not the case. It might be a bad action, but it's not because the utility value is negative. What you're doing is contrast, or what you're supposed to do in the hedonistic calculus is contrast this utility value with all of the other utility values of the other options that you have in front of you. It might be that when you run the other scenarios, you get a -5, a -8, -12, and this might be the best outcome. Now, we might just kind of intuitively guess that one of the other options would result in a higher utility value, such as the bully not punching Sam in the gut and instead letting him play. Even if the bully's disgruntled, the other kids aren't going to be very upset. Or even if they're kind of upset, the 5 here isn't going to be present in the negative column, and so we're going to have probably a higher utility value overall. But having a positive utility value as well doesn't indicate that. So even if Sam, was a tough kid and didn't really mind getting punched very much, even if he just had a 1 here and we had this kid over here with a 2, for example, so our numbers would change. Even if you had a positive value overall in terms of utility, so here we have 4 minus, subtract 4 from 5, so we'd have a 1. That doesn't indicate that this is a good action either. The right thing to do according to utilitarianism isn't any action with positive utility. It's the action that maximizes utility. So maximizing is important here. Not just positive utility, not just negative utility, but comparison of utility values among all the options that are present to you. So again, maximizing utility is important, is central to what utilitarianism is about. The right action is the one that maximizes utility. And utility is the overall amount of pleasure minus the overall amount of pain. And you have to run that through for each of the individuals involved and each of the scenarios that you might choose from. All right, so that's pretty much it for utilitarianism, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday.